Going on, chat? Waiting to see if anybody pops in this thing. First time going live on YouTube in the state of Mississippi. Right now, I'm in the state of Mississippi. Oh man, show y'all how institutionalized the boy really is, man. See this right here? What y'all know about that, man? Quick little on the road goulash, and it's not because I'm institutionalized. It's because it's a struggle meal and it's saving money on the road. You know what I mean? All right, so listen, we got one person in the chat. What's going on, bro? Type what's popping if you paying attention in the chat. I'm gonna see if anybody else comes in. If not, we're gonna take off with story time anyway. I'm gonna start trying to go live on YouTube at least once a day. So today is my first time. Right now I'm in the state of Mississippi. I'm at a gas station. I'm on my way to Houston from Florida. Um, so yeah, so while I'm driving through Mississippi, it made me start thinking about my first time going into a prison, from my release from prison. For those of you who, follow, my journey and my transition home out of prison. Joey Clark, what's going on, big dog? There you go. I appreciate it, man. Typing in what's popping in the chat. So for those of you who know, I did 12 years in prison and I've been home a little over 2 years now. While I was incarcerated, I encountered Jesus for real and he completely transformed my life. So upon release, and of course, obviously as well, while I was still incarcerated, not only was my life committed to live to Jesus, but also to be used by God to reach people, to reach the streets, especially with the gospel, to see people change, find salvation through faith in Christ, and walk in the purpose that God has for them. Excuse me. So at this time, I was maybe out for about a year, and I was still on parole. In the state of Florida, it's not parole; it's called CRD, controlled release. You got to do the rest of your good time on like probation, parole, if you violate this, if you back to prison. So I was still on parole at this time in the state of Florida, which means I couldn't travel. But I was given permission by my parole officer because I was out for a year. He seen I was, genuinely following Jesus, active in ministry, doing the right thing, working, take care of my kids and all that. That he gave me permission to go on my first tour throughout the nation. I just had to check in every state with him, but also too, I was able to go into a prison for the first time. So I was invited by Holy Culture and Track Stars to go to a Easter. It's about a year now. Last year, Resurrection Day event, Easter event at Mississippi State Prison, Parchman, and it was a death row event. It was the first time in the state of Mississippi that death row was actually allowed outside of their cells to come together for an event. And obviously, it was my. We went and we performed. We shared our story. Of course, we ministered the gospel. But the whole point that I'm getting at is, man, while I'm driving through Mississippi right now, I was thinking about that event at Death Row. And, I did 12 years, which is a lot of time, but it's nothing compared to people who are doing 20, 50, you know what I mean? People with life sentences, people who are on death row. I can't even comprehend that. So going to death row for the first time, I've been around a lot of lifers, so it wasn't like I didn't know what to expect. But it was just a first time experience for me, going to death row. One thing that really blew me though, like I remember I didn't realize it in the moment, but it was after the fact whenever I was reflecting and I thought about it now while I was driving through Mississippi. I remember listening now, these guys are on death row. They're in their cell 23 hours a day and they're in the cell by themselves. So the only interaction that they have with other, inmates, to my knowledge, is like them like screaming through the flap, you know what I mean, or fishing under the door. I'm pretty sure like when they go to rec or when they have religious services and all those things, that they can't intermingle, because they've been sentenced to death. They keep them completely isolated. So, like I mentioned, I'm pretty sure our event was the first time in Mississippi State history that they allowed the death row inmates not only out their cells for a concert, but to allow everybody in the gym together. So they had free reign in this gym. They had tables of food, they were serving food, and they were playing music for maybe about, half an hour before and after the event. So people could like congregate, hang out, and what I mean, just eat and just fellowship. But it was crazy because I remember after the event, I was like kind of like registering everything because we did two events. We did one event for death row, and we did another event for general population. But the general population, they were up like hanging out, walking around, eating, talking with me and the other guys who came in to volunteer for the event, and everybody was hanging out and they were moving around. But the death row inmates, everybody was sitting down. And I was thinking about it after this fact, and I'm thinking about it now driving through Mississippi today. I'm like, that's crazy because they say like scientifically, like psychologically, something happens inside your mind whenever you get confined to a cell for so long. So I can only imagine these guys who are being, sentenced to death, and they're waiting to be sentenced to death for like 10 years, 15 years, over a decade. And as they're waiting, they're doing years in a cell, a small cell at that. So now that they have the freedom, to be outside of their tiny cell and they're in this huge gym and there's music playing and there's food, that you would think that they would want to explore or, hang out. They would be excited. And they all were excited to be out there. So of course, that's why they all came. But like you really couldn't see it. You know what I mean? They were all just sitting like on the bench, like right next to each other. And they weren't even really all talking to each other. Some were hanging out, but for the most part, they were all like sitting down at the bench, staying to themselves. And I was just thinking, like, dang, this is probably the like effects of being institutionalized, and especially on the whole nother level because they are waiting to be put to death. They've been on the same cell for years, by themselves, isolated for years, and then even given the opportunity to like, you know, mingle or communicate or hang out with other people. It's like they don't even really know what to do. And I'm sure not everybody on death row is like that, but I'm just reflecting and looking back at that event and just saying like, dang, that's crazy. Being confined to a cell by yourself for years, for decades can do to your mind, psychologically. So, yeah, man, I've been uploading a lot of content here recently from that specific event, the Parchman, the biggest prison. I'm pretty sure it's a historical prison. I don't know if y'all know, but that movie Life with Eddie Murphy and Martin Lawrence, um, that movie was filmed at Parchman. So I'm pretty sure like the history behind that prison is back in like the freaking old days whenever there was slavery and all that. I think that Parchman used to actually be a plantation. Um, and I think they turned it into a prison. I don't know, and I don't even think I remember the fullness of the movie Life, but I just know that that's where the movie was filmed at, was at that prison. So definitely a lot of history there. So, anyways, man, yeah, that was definitely a crazy experience, man. And that was my first time going back into a prison a year ago now, and now it's crazy, man. By the hand of God and by the favor of God, going into prisons throughout the nation, just to remind, men and women that even in the midst of our incarceration, in the midst of our lowest low, that God got purpose for us. So, hey, listen, y'all keep following the journey, man. I got a whole bunch of more fire prison content coming. Not only of just me sharing my prison stories and my prison experiences, and other people sharing their crazy stories and prison experiences in their past, but a lot of prison footage coming as well. So y'all stay tuned. Monday is a new episode dropping with Wes Paul, part two, talking about his telemarketing fraud back in the day. So y'all stay tuned. It's your boy E. the King, and this is the Incarceration Podcast.